I'm leveraging these gifts and blessings and opportunities to my fullest ability, right? Making sure that I'm living a life certainly of success, but more importantly of significance, and that I'm being a great steward of these opportunities. Doing something more meaningful, really making the difference in the lives of others, making a 100x impact, as we call it with a good friend of ours, Lloyd Reed. That's the real challenge and the real opportunity.
Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on the journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying biblical billionaire principles. Our ultimate goal to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. Hey, I'm your host today, Brett Swartz. In every episode, we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach the next level of faith, success, and impact. I'm excited about our next guest. He's become a lifelong friend now, it feels like, even though it's only been just a couple of years. He's been previously on the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast multiple times. I feel like I've become like an adopted part of his family of DLP Capital. His name is Don Wenner, and he has scaled it literally from millions to billions with his company. But more than that, he has a heart and faith and focus on making a bigger impact in this world in so many ways. Please welcome to the show with me, Don Wenner. Don, how are we doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. It's always an honor to spend time with you and to have you on the show. And so we're talking about, faith and impact and scaling, and we're going to be diving into that today. Yeah. But before we go there, for people maybe just literally still meeting you for the first time, right? Yeah. Give people a little bit about your story, your focus, and maybe even just your a little bit of how you have grown to stewardship over the years, right? From even just the beginning.
Yeah. I love to. So kind of quick backstory. So founded DLP Capital now 18 years ago. Founded the company in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. So born to two young parents who had me at 16 years old, oldest of five. Parents who had the resources of two 16-year-olds. Mom ran a home daycare growing up. Dad was a correction officer. Divorced when I was young. But some reason, we all are, of course, given a certain set of skills and blessings and superpowers from the Lord. And fortunately for me, one of the gifts I was given was a certain level of drive and entrepreneurship. And that was that was prevalent as a young kid, even though nobody in my family had ever owned a business, nobody had been to college, no real example, but just had this desire, this entrepreneurial focus. And part of that came from struggle of a relatively young age, realizing one day that we didn't have any resources, we didn't have any money, and coming home one day crying from school because I was made fun of for the clothes I was wearing, and telling my mom I need to go to the store and buy new clothes, and her telling me, we don't have money to buy you clothes, like, suck it up, right? And I realized that moment that's never going to happen again. And so I started, I was working full time at 13, 14 years old, and multiple jobs because you couldn't work full time legally, running businesses, employing friends, and then moved out of my parents' house in high school and in short, stumbled into real estate at 20 years old. And it took off really, really fast. And so that was almost 19 years ago. We went from nothing, so you said millions to billions. We went from $0 to over the last 19 years, we've grown our revenue by about 50% annually for 18 years in a row. One of the 5,000 fastest growing companies in America, 12 years in a row. I've been obedient to what I've been called to do. We've been disciplined around doing so, and we've been able to grow consistently and gain scale. And now we're about $5.25 billion of assets. We'll do $600-700 million of revenue this year. And we're about 10% of the size to our big, hairy, audacious goal, which is to positively impact 10 million lives and become one of the 100 largest private companies in America on the Forbes list, which would put us at about $4 or $5 billion of revenue.
Absolutely amazing. A couple themes I want to touch on, right? Fear versus faith, right? Yeah. So you're a younger kid and you're having that intense, wow, looking up going, well, we don't have a lot, right? Yeah. And you start to realize that maybe 10, 11, 12, 13 and things are changing. So talk about the moments when you face that fear or that anxiety or the intensity, but instead you took action and you stepped out in faith. Now, faith, not just faith in like, hey, I can do this, or where that came from, and faith in the Lord, faith that you can push forward. Yeah. Where did that come from, and how was that kind of instilled like to the core?
Yeah, I'd say, I'm very blessed that I was raised by a mom who had strong faith, raised in the Catholic Church, and went to Catholic school off and on as a kid. And for me, my faith and my relationship with the Lord had always been present. That warmth, that comfort, that knowledge of my relationship and of Him was always there, and certainly grown over the years as I've become in as any relationship, in deeper relationship, but was always there. Then the confidence I had that the Lord equipped me with all the skills and abilities I needed to be successful was there and present, and I've learned much later in life about the concept of a growth mindset. I certainly didn't know that as a kid, and I've done a talk and wrote about a bit in one of the books I wrote of the 6 keys to success and significance, and one of those is having a growth mindset, and that's Carol Dweck wrote a really famous book called Mindset, and it's the concept that if you're, in simple terms, if you're willing to put in the work to learn, that you can learn anything, right? We don't have a fixed ability. You can learn anything if you're willing to put in the work to learn it, right? A lot of people say, oh, it's just who I am. That's just what I am. I'm just not good at this. I'm just not good at that. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that, hey, I might not be good at this today, but if I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to study, I'm willing to work, I can become great at anything. And I've always had that belief that, hey, I can accomplish anything, and a big part of that was due to my faith in the Lord, but always had this extreme amount of confidence that I could do anything because I'd work hard enough. And I remember in 8th grade, a gentleman came in on a career day, and you might remember those in middle school, and one of the guys that came in, he was a financial advisor, and he had this little laminated chart that showed how much money financial advisors made, and they made more money than doctors, lawyers, accountants, all the jobs, kind of parents want you to become. And in that moment, the way, at least what I remember, and I'm sure it's not what he actually said, but as an 8th grader, what I heard him say was, to be great as a financial advisor, you had to be great at math, and you had to be entrepreneurial, self-starter, willing to work hard. And I said, well, that's me. And so I was convicted that's what I'm going to do. So I literally started shadowing financial advisors in 8th grade, going and working with them for the day. And I remember after the very first day going out with this financial advisor, and I have my notepad and I'm writing stuff down as we go on these client appointments. I remember we go to lunch after the first or second appointment, and I asked him, I said, hey, are you going to follow up with her sister? And he goes, what are you talking about? He said, well, you were asking her a question. She said their sister was about to retire, and are you going to follow up with the sister? And he's like, yeah, I'll follow up with her. So next time I meet him, I go out again. I asked him, hey, what happened with the sister? He said, what are you talking about? I remind him again. He never did anything about it, right? And I go on the next appointment with him, realize he's not taking notes. He's not paying attention. He's not picking up the obvious cues that I'm hearing. And I was convicted I could do his job not better when I was 25. I could do his better job right now, right? And I was convicted about it, right? And had that belief that I could do it. But so, and I've always had that, and it's certainly a blessing that the Lord gave to me. But I came to this realization a couple years ago. I was sitting in a meeting we had. It was actually a woman's kind of leadership meeting we were having at DLP, and it was a room of 20 female team members, a number of our senior female leaders in the organization, and also a number of our female leaders are not white as well, right? They have different ethnicities, and I was sitting in the meeting, kind of show support and listen, and it hit me in that meeting that, well, maybe the reason I always had so much confidence that I could do anything, that I could accomplish anything, was because I'm a white man living in a country where most of the people who are really successful in the world of business are white men, right? So the people who have done what I want to do, because I've always had the mindset, well, if somebody else did it, of course I can do it, right? If somebody else has been a successful real estate agent, developer, financial advisor, well, of course I can do so because somebody else has done it. I'm going to work harder. I'm plenty smart enough. I've got the Lord behind me. Of course I can do it, right? But they all look like me, right? So I've come to recognize, again, another blessing that's been provided to me in this country, in this earth, that's made it a lot easier, right? And it's made it much easier to be able to have the opportunity. I just got done coming into this meeting. I had a meeting with our accelerators, which are young analysts who just came out of school. So I just got done kind of giving them an hour and a half kind of meeting, answering their questions, and having some of these conversations with them of like, to live in the United States today as a white man in this time on earth, the information age, the greatest country on earth, despite what the politicians might want to tell you, to achieve the American dream, right? To become a millionaire, have the nice house with a white picket fence, whatever you want to define that as, to have financial success, to get to millions, to use your example, that's sort of table stakes. You should do that. That should be expected. If you're an educated person in this country, in this opportunity, you should be able to do those things, right? Doing something more meaningful, really making the difference in the lives of others, making 100x impact, as we call it, with a good friend of ours, Lloyd Reeb. That's the real challenge and the real opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, so many key things there. I want to dive in on the stewardship piece, right?
Yeah.
And not taking for granted what the Lord has given you, right?
Yeah.
And not making any excuses or looking at the negative when things were challenging, right? Either as a kid, either parents divorced. My parents were divorced when I was young, right? But even now, you talked about. I was in a meeting with you guys last week for Alignment Day, right? Yeah. And you talked about John Maxwell, right? And putting that goal a year ago before you even knew him.
Yeah.
And now you know him. Now he's mentoring you. But more than that, you're not taking that for granted, right? You're going to pour into that. So not settling, even as you've scaled from millions to billions, right? And meeting someone like John Maxwell and to be able to pour into you, right? So what's the biggest thing you've been able to take away from John, right? Spending the time you spent with him so far that maybe surprised you or just like has impacted you the most when it comes to that? And how are you practicing making sure to be a good steward with people like John or just even the company? Like what's the day-to-day, the rhythms, the months, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, so the verse of my life is too much has been given, much will be required. And people like to hear, and I hit on little bits of it in my little intro, but every time I'm on a stage or a podcast or a conversation with somebody and you've achieved financial success, which in this country, we like to, worship, people who've achieved financial success and put them on a pedestal. And people love to hear the rags to riches stories, right? They want to hear how you, through your own powers and your own ability, because you're so incredibly smart and so much greater than everybody else, right, that you accomplish these incredible feats, right? And I know that not to be true, right? That everything I'm able to accomplish is because of the blessing provided to me, and because I hit this lottery, right, of living in this country at this time on earth as a white man, raised in faith, with parents who love me, in a good school district. With I was poor by American standards, but everything I ever needed, right? What blessings I've been provided with, right? And it's a different mindset, right? To steward not just the resources financially, but these blessings, these skills, these opportunities that I've been provided.
I think about compounding them, right? All of them, instead of looking at with the growth mindset versus the scarcity mindset, right?
Yep.
Compounding all of these things that have and not taking that for granted. And part of me, that's being a good steward, right? You've given these gifts, these talents, all of the things, and to use it to compound it to keep growing, and that's the best thing. And one other thought I have too, as you keep going here, the fear of man versus the fear of God, right? Yeah. So I'm reading a book called The Awe of God, and reading it the second time, and I'm just like, this is so powerful, right? So talk about just that in itself and how the Lord has worked through you to be like, you know what, I'm staying true to what He's telling me to do, staying true to the core values of integrity, of not taking it for granted, of being a steward, right? Talk about that.
Yeah. So I have been on this journey, as we all have, right, for now, this is about to be 40, and been on this journey now in my career for almost 20 years, and I'm a little I'll say obsessive in wanting to make sure I'm leveraging these gifts and blessings and opportunities to my fullest ability, right? Making sure that I'm living a life certainly of success, but more importantly of significance, and that I'm being a great steward of these opportunities, right? And I can find myself at times being like, man, I'm not doing enough, right? And so I find myself in regular conversation with the Lord, saying, Lord, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Is this what I'm called to do, right? Is there something else I should be doing? Am I doing enough, right? And I've heard multiple times in simple terms the message of don't get distracted, right? And I can find myself being so focused on wanting to do more to then get distracted and to go out in a different path. And I know I've heard in those quiet times multiple times not to get distracted. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which my calling is to transform lives through the building of thriving communities. And that's I use our organization DLP Capital as the platform and the stage that gives me as the platform to do that. And I've gotten clearer over the years that compounding effect, as you said, of how am I going to do that, right? How do I leverage the stage? How do I leverage the knowledge, the relationships, the resources to do that? And so to come back to your question about John Maxwell, John is an incredible man, and a few of the things that have really stood out to me, speaking of compounding interest. So John is, I think, 77 years old today, and most people know him for writing leadership books. He's written now over 100 leadership books, right? Well, not just leadership, but 100 books. 77 years old, been doing this now, call it 50 years, right? He's had more impact in the last 3 or 4 years than he had in the first 50 years, right? Because the compounding efforts of the good name he's built, the credibility, the relationships, the knowledge that he literally has a program called Transforming Nations, and countries, top leaders, often presidents of countries, ask him to come there and help them transform their country, right? They have him come and teach his education in their schools. They have him come to the business community and roll out his roundtables and his Beyond Success tables in the business community. They have him come in and teach to the government leaders, the military leaders. And what's really amazing is most people think of John as a leadership guru. He frames himself as an evangelist disguised as a leadership expert, right? And he's out teaching biblical wisdom in books where people are giving him credit, but he's teaching scripture, right? And doing so in such an amazing way. I had no idea until the past year of getting to know him that he's at a point now where this year he'll bring 1 million people to Christ, and he expects within 3 years it'll be 1 million people a month, right? So you want to think, hey, what more can I be doing, right? What more could I leverage this platform, these relationships, these knowledge? Wow, what an example, right? One of the things that's big on John's heart and that he's been helping me with is how to best do so and how to weave the line. So I've in my business at DLP Capital, I've become more and more, I'll say, confident, sophisticated, capable of being faith forward in our organization, internally helping our team members in their faith journey. We've had the great joy now of having many team members who've come to accept Jesus as their Savior here, but doing so externally with our investors, with other sponsors. So doing so in my own journey, my own organization's been great. But the next step to that is quite obvious. Is I've got to help other organizations do the same, because I know many incredible Christian men and women running incredible organizations, men and women of great faith, but they're afraid to do so in their business. They're afraid of the consequences of doing so and learning how you do so. And John's a phenomenal example of how he's done so. And he still gets asked to come on stage to some of the biggest secular organizations in the world, and that gives him the opportunity to share his faith and really impact the world. So it's been quite humbling and quite inspirational to see what somebody like John's doing, and it's been quite humbling to have him be willing to pour into me and help me do better.
Yeah, I can't help but sense that the Lord is blessing you with you being faithful for what He's given you, right? And you keep being faithful, and He pours on more, right? Yeah. The 1 talent, the 2 talent, the 5 talent, the 10 talents, right? Yeah. And it's like, to much who's been given, much has been required. But also, as you're faithful, He's going to pour into that. And so, world-class leaders, arguably one of the greatest world leaders of all time, right? Especially in America, so that John can pour into you, and that's incredible. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the common sense practices that you believe perhaps are often overlooked when it comes to implementing either faith into business and or just common sense practices in business today for just core values that are just timeless? Like, what are some of the ones that are maybe overlooked that are like, hey, if companies did 1, 2, and 3, they can go from just stagnating at millions, they could grow to billions.
Yeah, I'd say the first thing that I would say is too many organizations are not intentional enough about what it is that they want to accomplish, right? So getting really clear about what is the purpose, what is the meaning, what is the why does the organization exist, and getting crystal clear about that, and then getting clear on what are the values that are fundamental to the organization. What are the values that you're willing to die on the cross for? Meaning, in the world of business, that you're willing to sacrifice revenue, opportunities, worldly recognition, etc., to withhold. And when you start with those places, that help. If you really make those your purpose and your values front and center, that guides a lot. It'll guide the types of people you attract into your organization, who are attracted to you, and who you want to bring in your organization. It'll attract types of clients you want to serve, and who want to work with your organization. So that's for many organizations really where it starts, and not getting wrapped up. In just having the core values that sound good on your brochure, right? Integrity and service and things like that. Maybe those are your core values, but is that something that really separates your organization? Something you're really willing to die upon? In a lot of organizations, it's not, right? At the end of the day. And then
something comes to mind before you go that. So David Green had one of those moments, right? When Hobby Lobby, he had to put everything on the line.
Yeah.
And we went to the High Road Leadership Conference in Oklahoma City, and he spoke about that. And I was blown away by it. Can you share a time when you had to, perhaps put more or a huge amount on the line and for what you believed in? What was the outcome?
Yeah.
And how has the Lord helped you through that, right? Like a Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego kind of moment.
Yeah. So I'll just take a quick step back, and I'm going to answer that. So, when we talk about purpose, I think one thing important to note is, and our friend Tim Tebow said this really well, is, a calling, a purpose is divine and urgent. And so if your purpose is your purpose, it's not only divine, but it's urgent, right? There's urgency to take action. There's urgency to grow. There's urgency to provide the product, the service, the solution, to provide the impact that you have, right? There's real pressure that you have to do this. There's not an option of failure. There's an option of not moving forward. You have to do so, and do so now. So to answer your question, so I've certainly had a number of cases of being in situations where being true to our values, being true to what we're called to do, being true to my faith has presented decisions that were painful in the short term, right? I've had situations where we've had to part with leaders that was painful to the organization, but knew we're not living in alignment with our values, and became very costly, not just in lost opportunities, but in legal actions. Right? I've had to deal with it. I don't want anybody to get confused that being faith forward in an organization will come with challenges. It will come with hate. It will come. The devil will attack. Right? And I've had some very costly financial, but what's, when that you're a steward, not an owner, right? At the end of the day, I'm giving what's his, not mine. And so I've had to write checks to stay true to what I know I'm responsible to do, and what I'm called to do. And that's not easy in the moment, especially when it's big, right? And it's painful. And I've dealt with people, throwing stones and mud over it, and it can be challenging in that moment. But then it's easy to take a step back and look at some of the great people in the past who legitimately died on the cross over their faith, and say, hey, giving some of what's his, or dealing with some uncomfort, or having to sit through a deposition or something that I don't enjoy. That's not putting it all on the line, right? I've never had to be called to put it on the line, but certainly I've had to take things that a lot of people would say are pretty significant worldly losses to stay true to values, stay true to our faith, stay true to what we're called to do. Absolutely. And that's part of what you'll face if you go down that journey.
I'm thinking about Philippians 2, right? Where he gave up everything, right? And he humbly accepted and went to the cross, right? Did everything for us. And then coming back to Tim Tebow, it's divine and urgent, right?
Yeah.
The calling is is going to put real pressure, and it's going to put you in situations where it's going to be painful.
Yeah.
Right. And it should be. And that is the opportunity. That is the growth. That is the, embrace that. That is, to me, that's the privilege, right? As one of the, I think leadership quotes or verses that I try to stream by is it's a privilege, not a sacrifice, to pay the price for my dreams. Right.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's a privilege, not a sacrifice, to take that next hard decision and be faithful, because you know that the Lord, it's ultimately in His hands, right?
Yep.
So, walking through, I think you had another thought on John that I cut you off on that I went on, but anything else on John there, finishing kind of those thoughts of what you've learned about compounding and learning from him and just, I don't want to stop that one on John. Anything come to mind there?
Not exactly on John. Maybe it'll weave in, but to answer your question about, you kind of tied in with John earlier about, what are the things that organizations don't do who want to go from millions to billions, and is they lack, first getting clear on what they're called to do, what their values are, what they're willing to sacrifice. But then fundamentally, this is sound a bit harsh, but most aren't willing to do the hard work necessary. And maybe that's because they haven't got clear on what they're called to do, and it's not divine and urgent. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's fear, and they're afraid of growth. They're afraid of putting themselves out there. They're afraid of the pressure of failure and getting out of the comfortness of living in a cozy, air-conditioned world and not having to challenge themselves, right? I wrote a book sitting right here, Building an Elite Organization, follow-up book to that, and I think the framework of building an elite organization, which is a system we built called the Elite Execution System, and it's just a framework to putting discipline and structure around the pursuit of your divine and urgent calling. And I've had a lot of leaders who are very blessed. I've had a lot of leaders read that book, and I'll hear from a lot of leaders who are incredibly capable, talented, intelligent people who often hear things along the lines of, I read your book, and we think a lot alike. I loved it, and I like Jim Collins too, and I like John Maxwell too, and I like those types of people, and I believe with a lot of the same stuff, importance of leadership, and but I'll often hear something to the effect of, and I do a lot of that stuff, I just don't do it organized and disciplined like the way you do it, but otherwise it's the same, right? And it's not the same. The whole point of the elite execution system is the rigor and discipline to be obedient to the pursuit of that calling, right? It's hard work, right? The level of discipline it takes to have the meeting rhythms, to hold ourselves to really clear, measurable priorities at very clear, measurable deadlines, and to run an organization as the founder and CEO, who often are very visionary people who want more freedom, to the level of discipline and structure that I put on my own life, that I put on our organization, because I know the results that generates. I know that's why we've, in addition to certainly God's favor, but I know that's why we've grown by 50% a year for 18 years in a row, is the level of discipline and rigor we put out. It's not fun every day, right? On Mondays, I start my first meeting at 8 a.m. My last meeting, I'm usually finished at 6 or 7, where I didn't have one singular minute from 8 to 6 where I wasn't in an intense meeting where we're talking about issues, which is what the meetings is focused around, solving issues. And it wasn't nonstop where I'm not at the end of the day tired and frustrated because we've got lots of things to fix and lots of problems to address. But we addressed them first, start the week off full steam and with energy and effort and urgency. And we do that every single Monday, right? And it'd be a lot easier to say, hey, let's cut back on that structure and let's let everybody just kind of do their work. And we've got good people who want to work hard, and we don't need to do all that structure. We don't need all the discipline. And on the short term, a lot of people would rather do that, right? It's the whole concept of discipline, right? Of giving up what you want right now for what you really want, right? Giving up short-term pleasure for long-term fulfillment, right? We'd all like to eat a donut right now, right? Everybody likes donuts, right? But you give up a donut because you want to live long, right? You want to be healthy. You want to be here for your children. You want to, be capable mentally and physically to still perform later in life, right? It's that same concept in our businesses, and I just find too many very capable leaders with purpose, with strong values, with a product or a solution that could impact lots and lots of people, that can do a lot of great but they're not willing to put the discipline and structure in place to be great. I've read lots of books around small is beautiful, the small giant, these different books around, hey, having a great tiny little business, right? And that there's great pleasure that can come out of that. But I hate to say it, that's nonsense. It's written by people who are afraid of growth, afraid of stepping up and having impact, because it can't be a great business with a big calling and not grow, right? If you know what you do is in the need of other people, you can't stay small. You can't, right? That's you being afraid of growth and wanting to make yourself feel better. If you really have something that can impact this world, if you really are clear on what you're called to do, you want to help as many people as possible, which means you have to grow.
Amen and amen. I think about rigor and discipline and the urgency of the day to day, and then being willing to go the week to week, and I've seen your intentionality over the last couple of years that I've had a chance to observe, and it's challenged and it's moving me towards, doing those things, right? So for you, for the intentionality piece, I think this is really cool, right? And you see it with John, right? Yeah. But who else has been those big people in your life that were like, Tim Tebow's another one, right? It's like, it's urgent and it's now, right? It's urgent and it's now, and it's discipline. Are there any other like big figures that have helped you to continue that? I know one of my rhythms I'm doing right now is Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Helps me be a better communicator, negotiator, business person, just thinker. Like, I'm a masterclass. Like I'm obsessive with it. I've watched it probably 55 times. I read the book and I got a little bit, and then I listened to the audiobook, got a little bit more, but I got the masterclass and I'm like, whoa. And I'm going like, everybody should listen to this 50 times. I want to like train on it. I want to coach. I mean, it's just like, it's pouring out of you, right? The intentionality. So how do you continue that energy? Where is that coming from? Is there anything that feeds into that? I think that's a big secret to like part of how you're so passionate and continue on this.
I had this a similar conversation to this with John, and he had an interesting kind of feedback to it. And it was kind of just a kind of on the fly kind of conversation, I guess you could say. But I asked him about, kind of how does he think about, his goals and the growth he has, and I was asking him, how does he think about prioritizing and managing his time, and he's got, a lovely wife. They've been married 55 years, Margaret, and great kids and a bunch of grandkids now. And he gets called on by people around the world to help him, right? And literally by leaders of countries, and he gets asked to be on stage, and he travels a lot, and he's putting out a book or two a year, every year, or 3, right? And so I asked him, how do you have so much? And he's 77 years old now, right? And why are you still pushing so hard? How do you think about integrating, balancing your time? I call it work-life integration. And he said to me, Don, I found that there's certain small number of people that I've come across that just simply have a tremendous amount of more energy than everybody else. And I'll explain what he said and then kind of what I've thought about it since. And he said, that's just how I've been, speaking of himself. He said, I've just always had this endless energy. And he said, most people who know me closely and my family said, they can't really understand it. They can't appreciate it. You got to learn how to temper it down and at times. But he said, that's how I've always been, right? And I've always had this insane amount of energy. And then he's still like that at 77, not in the greatest physical shape, right? But he's still got this endless amount of energy, right? And it's always been, and that's how I've always felt. I do get a decent amount of sleep, but I jump up excited every morning. My mind goes full speed all day. I don't feel tired. I could do it 7 days a week, 20, every day of the year. I have such incredible joy for what I get to do every day, and for a lot of people, they'll look at my calendar as an example, which I've showed in some different trainings, and like, it's overwhelming. It tires me out just looking. Those people tell me all the time, it tires me out just looking at the intentionality and the amount of structure and just the amount of sheer volume of what stuff is on there, right? And that's it's kind of how I've always been. But I think of it, and John didn't say this, but the way I thought about it afterwards is the people I know who have incredible amount of energy, who just always seem to be able to take on more and just continue to grow and rise, and as their world gets bigger, as their responsibilities get bigger, just seem to be able to find time to manage it, right? The people who are running a large business or ministry or whatever the case, but somehow still find time to be incredible fathers or mothers and write books or whatever else, right? And serve on multiple ministries when they're running. Those people say, well, how are they doing it, right? Certainly they're disciplined, absolutely, and focused and structured and build their skills so they can be better at the tasks they do to get more out of each minute. But often it's that they have more energy and go longer and do more, right? And it doesn't all mean doing your business. That may mean making sure that, hey, when you worked a 12 or 14-hour day, you still brought that same level of energy home to your kids and gave them the same level of energy you gave at work all day, right? And had impactful, meaningful time and focused effort with your children, right? Or your wife or your church. And so what I think it is that the people who are blessed to get really clear on what they're called to do, that's what gives you that energy, right? If I didn't have the absolute clarity around feel that sense of urgency around what I'm called to do, I wouldn't have that energy, right? And a simple test for that to me is if I'm in a situation where I'm doing something, which doesn't happen very often, fortunately, but if I'm doing something, and usually I can reframe my mind because it's usually wrong, but if I find myself in a moment where I think I'm doing something that's not moving me towards my goals, if I find myself spending time in a meeting or something that I don't think is going to help me to live out my calling, I do feel tired. And I feel like I could go to sleep right in that meeting, and I lose interest, and my energy goes down, right? And usually I found myself, like, I'll give an example. If I'm hanging out with my wife and her friends, right, and they're not friends maybe that I connect with their husbands or we have things to talk about, I can easily feel like, bored out of my mind and feel tired and, wish I could go take a nap or something, right? But usually I've challenged myself to realize, hey, I could be pouring into somebody here. There's somebody here I could be learning, getting to know, and serving in some way. But and I found many times by taking that approach, I've had impactful, sometimes life-changing conversations and impactful. But anyway, what I find, because when I know I've got clear goals and I'm pursuing them, it fills you with energy. So I just encourage, if you get clear on what you're called to do, that energy will come out of you. And if you're finding yourself short on energy, don't get me wrong, people have health issues and different things that could affect things, but I find often you need to get clear on what you want to accomplish.
Let's get real practical.
Yeah.
By the way, amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. So how often are you looking at your goals, right? How often are you reviewing the month, the week? I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they wake up in the middle of the night and their brain has 10 things that just start firing off, right? It's like you're already going. You're like, it's 3:00. I need to get back to sleep, right? And then I'm going to wake up in a couple hours, right? So talk about your rhythms to clear your mind of the things that need to be done or the things that you're feeling poured towards, and then how you're constantly disciplining your clarity on your mind.
So I think, I'm very blessed, and I've said this, half joking, is probably not correct thing to say, but I fall asleep. My latency, you wear an Oura Watch, my latency, how long it takes me to fall asleep is 1 to 2 minutes. And so that's a great blessing. And part of that, I think, is that my mind, my conscious, my mind's clear, and I put in rhythms to make sure that before I go to bed, my evening routine is I'm clearing for the next day. I'm preparing for what I need to do. I'm getting everything out there. I'm feeling organized and prepared almost every day before I go to bed, right? And that takes structure and rhythm to do that. But I'm very blessed that when my head hits that pillow, I'm out, and I sleep sound and sleep. I have really high quality sleep, and I really always have. But I think if I wasn't clear, if I was in a place of turbulence or and you certainly had moments of that, and you get somebody really sick in your family or something like that where that changes, right? But most of my life, I've been able to have really high quality sleep and hit the bed and go out because I put rigor and discipline to make that happen. So for me, I need that clarity before I go to bed. So I put a rhythm in place and it changed. I have a young child today, and there's been times where he's been up to 11, 12 at night, and I'll throw that off a little bit. But most nights I get clear, not only on what I need to do tomorrow, but I get clear, to your point, on my big picture priorities, and I give myself that chance to wrestle with whatever question I have in my mind about what I should be doing next, or is this in alignment with my values, or should I move forward with this big decision or this big hire, or whatever that big decision is. So I put that rigor in place. I put the rigor in place in my morning routine to get up early, and to have time. So my rhythm is to have time with the Lord. That's walking with Jesus, I call it. So reading scripture while I walk, time for prayer, time for quiet, and then time to journal, and then time to work out. Usually I do that with a book in my ear. And do that all early in the morning before the day gets going, clear my mind. Many times my mind runs all day, kind of your note, and I've sent myself 10 or 15 emails before I started my day of emailing myself an idea that came while I was working out or I was walking. And I'd like to say, hey, I've mastered meditation and that I can clear my mind completely and other ideas don't pop in my head when I'm in a conversation, Lord, but they do all the time. And I find I've got to send myself a note about it to clear it out of my mind, so that I can get back to focusing on what's in front of me. So I send a lot of notes to myself to be able to keep my mind clear and focused and present where I'm at. I think that's one of the places where people struggle the most with is mastering presence. And presence is when there's no conflict between where your body is physically and where your mind is mentally. And that's a really hard thing to do, right? When we always have a demand, right? We just got interrupted here a second ago by our friend Justin here telling us I got to jump to another meeting, right? And there's always that pressure. Well, next thing I got to do, your mind can easily go off on what's next. And I find, when I talk to young fathers like you and I and Justin, who's here with us, and they think, hey, I'm going to go into this rhythm where, I'm going to start getting home for dinner, right? I'm going to get home for dinner. And they get home for dinner, but they're taking phone calls. That's the worst thing you do. Right? That's the obvious, right? Hey, I'm taking phone calls. I'm on calls. I'm not even there at all. Ignoring that is a step forward, right? But then if, hey, all right, well, I'm sitting there, but I'm on my computer and I'm doing other stuff, maybe not on a phone call, but on a computer, I'm not really paying attention. That can be worse than not being home at all. But even if you're not doing that, even if you're shooting baskets or in the pool, but you're, again, not listening, you're not engaged, you're not paying attention, you're focused somewhere else when there's conflict between where your body is and your mind is. That's what I found the most successful people I know, they master that presence. So if I'm in a conversation with him or her, I feel like I'm the only person in that person's world, right? They're not checking their phone. And these are people I know who have 40,000 employees, right? Big responsibilities. Doesn't mean there aren't a million things going on and that person has to address, but they've trained themselves on the importance of being present in that moment, because otherwise I could spend an hour on something. I mean, if I'm not really there, get nothing accomplished. Now I need to spend another hour on it later, and it takes more time, right? So one of the reasons they get more done is because they're fully present and engaged. They can make decisions then, right? Anytime you have a problem in your life or your business, you have a problem because somebody has made a decision, right? So you can make decisions more quickly, and then you don't have to keep meeting on things again and again and again. You make decisions, you move forward versus being stuck in this hamster wheel without change, without improvement.
I think it's stewardship of presence is what it sounds like you're saying, right?
Yeah.
It's not only stewardship to grow from millions to billions, stewardship to scale for impact, but it's down to the minute, like every single interaction and where you're at, your mind and your body, you're clear on your goals, you're clear on where you're going. We're running out of time. We're way over time.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap it up with just a quick lightning round, and then we'll be done, okay? Sure. So, top book that you've read or you're reading right now that you feel it's like making a big impact for you.
So I'm reading, I just finished Practicing the Way by John Comer, which is really great. As an organization, we're reading a book called Outliers right now, and that really is a really interesting one that help you reframe your thinking around, hey, I'm just so special because I'm so skilled, but a lot of times it's the opportunity and the place we are, and that provides opportunities. And then I love that, rereading that book so much. I'm reading Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink right now, which is pretty awesome.
Awesome. Second question, what are you most curious about right now? We're coming up to an election here in a couple months, and there's a lot going on in the world. Anything that you're just really curious about in the next 6-12 months?
What I'm most curious about right now is, we've been really focused on trying to create what we call thriving community life, trying to help, easiest way to describe it, help our residents who live in our rental communities, about 85,000 of them, to live a life of significance, live fully, as we call it, to flourish. And so we've been learning and playing with and figuring out what are the elements of living fully, what are the elements of living a life of success, significance, what are the elements of somebody flourishing as a person, and so figuring out what that formula is. I know the gentleman a couple of days ago who talked about a Harvard study, the seven something of flourishing people, and really interesting way they frame up the 7 components of what it takes to flourish as a person, as a family, as a community. So that's what I'm most curious right now, trying to figure out how do we best bring the programming, the support, the resources, the environment to help people flourish?
And then the very last question, I want you to encourage, challenge, exhort, like really push the millionaire right now who's listening to this, and he has the aspirations, he has the goals in his mind to scale to billions, to scale for impact, right? And he has a chance to sit down with you for just 60, 90 seconds here. What would you encourage him to do? How would you he's like, hey Don, I want a push or encouragement. What would you say to him?
I'd say get really clear on what you're called to do. Understand that the concept of what you're called to do is divine and urgent. Understand that as responsibility. Understand that your business can be and should be a ministry to live out, a calling that impacts our lives, and then get really serious about doing the hard work. Putting in a system like the Elite Execution System, putting in a framework to how do you set clear strategy, how do you achieve your goals, how do you drive clear communication, how do you solve problems as you go through growth.
Amazing. Don Wenner, for those who want to get in touch with you, would you mind one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Sure. You can go to dlpcapital.com, find us on any social media sites. You can check out on dlpcapital.com our events page, webinars, education we do, live events. We'd love for you to come join us somewhere.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on the show, sharing your wisdom with us. And for all our listeners, thank you so much for listening to the Build to Billions podcast. Check us out on YouTube as well if you're listening to us on the Apple or Spotify, wherever you're at. And go to buildtobillions.com for more resources, more information, more interviews like this. Appreciate everyone watching out there, listening, and we'll talk again real soon. Bye now.